The last two times we compared US with UK covers ended in a tie, so let's hope this time we can break that tied streak and see which covers are truly best. As before, we are relying on Ash's Infinite Library, the book blogger, who I'll link below, who has curated several lists of books with the UK covers versus the US covers. So let's go ahead and do another round. First up is The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. The US version has a black cover. The UK version has a sort of aqua color, and not really impressed by either cover, but I think the US is more readable, and I mean, we're just showcasing wheat. So I think I'm going to give it to the US. Next up is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Everyone's talking about this book. I haven't read it yet. I haven't read anything by Andy Weir, who also, well, the two things he wrote is The Martian and Hail Mary, but I've heard good things about him. But just looking at the covers, they look so similar. In fact, the only difference is they switched the name of the author and the title, and I guess the fonts are a little different, but it has that same astronaut floating in space. The US version goes with this yellow gold theme, and the UK version goes with sort of this reddish theme. I'm going to give it to the UK simply because the red gives more danger. There seems to be more at stake when you see this red, what are they, fire flames? I don't know what, but both are very similar. But UK, I think, for the color scheme, edges out the US. Next we have Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Aimedi. Forgive me for mispronouncing the name, I'm sure I did. But anyway, the US version looks like a playing card off of the Ace of Spades, and the UK version is just two silhouettes. I think there's no question the US wins this one. It's much more interesting. I love how it looks like a playing card with the two figures, top and bottom. And the UK version, although it looks more adult, looks a little grim. So definitely giving it to the US. Next up is The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary. And covers are similar, neither of which really call to me. The UK version, the font is easier to read, especially a white background with the red font. I guess this is supposed to be humorous. The US version has this turquoise cover and a more interesting artwork because you see figures in it. Boy, this is a toss-up, but I'm not going to tie an individual entry, so I'm going to pick one, and I think my eye keeps going back to the UK version. There's something about that font and that illustration that my eyes are being drawn to. And we're starting off with a tie 2-2, so that's fun. And then we have Recursion by Blake Crouch. And both are very simple covers. The US version is yellow with looks like the figure 8. UK version is dark blue with sort of this orangey red font, and it looks like some type of space station. Although usually I'm more drawn to the illustrated type of covers that you see in this UK version, there's something really generic about it. The figure 8 at least is kind of interesting. It's giving me like a racetrack or infinity symbol, or whatever that is. And the yellow does make it pop, so I think I'm gonna have to give it to the US. Next up is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. And similar covers, they're both using that same sort of goldenrod color. In the US version, we see an illustration of two people with their faces cut in half, as they do in this type of book. The UK version has a more cartoony type illustration, but there's this weird obstruction over their face. One has a green leaf, a bird and the other has a blue one. I don't know what's going on with that, but I like the UK illustration better. The US version just seems like I've seen it 100 times before. I kind of like this sort of quirky illustration. So, UK. Next up is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, and I actually believe I read this book and forgot that I read it, and then started seeing the television series, and then the whole plot came back to me. I was like, oh, I did read this book. Anyway, in the US version, it looks like, is that a pentagram? No. It's just these symbols floating in a sky over some type of cityscape. And it's the cover I'm used to. The UK version is much different. We just really see that font, A Discovery of Witches, with these, looks like red blowing sheets or something. I don't know. It's, I don't like the UK version. I much prefer the US version. So, another point to the US. Next up is Anna K by Jenny Lee. And the US version has a photorealistic person, which I don't usually like. And I do like the font, the Anna K is very striking. The UK version, I think it's photorealistic too, but there's something, they did something in Photoshop that makes it look a little bit cartoony, but I love that pink background that makes the image pop. I'm gonna have to just say UK version. Eyes are definitely drawn to that one a lot more than the US version. Okay, I'm not trying to do this on purpose, but we still have a tie, 4-4. Okay, next up is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. And I haven't read this, but I am familiar with the cover of the US version of Ariadne. I've seen that a lot, and it has that face of a woman with the sun behind it, very illustrated. The UK version just has leaves. Well, no, there's a little blue statue over the name of the author. I have to say the US version, my eyes are going to the US cover. I think the colors are more distinct. Yeah, I'm definitely drawn more to the US. The UK, although it's pretty, you almost lose the name of the title of the book in all those gold leaves. So next up is Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. And I have read this, believe it or not. It is a young adult retelling. Well, it's a fantasy. The story is kind of interesting. The fairy tale of Cinderella actually happened, only it happened far in the past, and the society is based around the story of Cinderella. Anyway, it's an okay book. I think for me, it's like a 3.5-star book. Anyway, just looking at the covers, they're very, very similar, except different illustrations, but it's showcasing the young girl who's the main character. So really, which artwork do I like more? And I think I like the UK more. I sort of like that glossy, rich look more than the flatter S version. So, UK. Next we have Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Malibu, baby. Okay, covers are very similar. I guess they're images of Malibu as a beach, only the US version looks like kayak boats on an ocean, and the UK version looks like waves. I guess the waves gives more action in the UK version, but the kayak boats give more interest in the US version. I wouldn't pick either of these books up based on the covers, but of the two, I'm gonna have to say the US. The US is giving me more interest because I am curious about these little kayaking boats. UK version's telling me nothing. Next up is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Book I've read. Love this book. It's a near future sort of dystopian society about people who are, I think they're clones that are just grown for organ transplants. But it's a very, very interesting novel. However, we're just looking at the covers here. The US version just has a person's face looking very concerned. And the UK version has sort of this fuzzy looking woman out of focus woman that could be doing anything. She could be running, she could be dancing, she could be doing laundry, I don't know. But I could go either way with this one, but I'm not going to tie. I am not going to tie. I'm going to give it to the US. Those eyes are really spooky and drawing me in, kind of really making me ask questions about the book. So I'm going to go with the US. Okay, as it is, the US is ahead. 7 books to 5 books. So let's move on. People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. And don't like either of these covers, and they're very similar. Oh-ho! Okay, we were just talking about this on my live stream, where sometimes the UK changes the name of the title. Okay, US it's People We Meet on Vacation. In the UK it's You and Me on Vacation. Why did they change it? I have no idea. The titles sound very similar to me. And in fact, the covers are similar. The US has an orange background with 2 people on lounge chairs. The UK version has a pink and blue theme rather than orange and green, with a girl floating on a pool in a unicorn floaty. So I think I can read the title more on the US version, but the UK is giving me more, because I see palm trees, I see those mountains, I'm thinking Palm Springs, I'm thinking Art Nouveau with those color choices. So I think I'm going to go with the UK. Next we have 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. And I've seen this cover before, the US version anyway, with the girl on the cover, the Asian girl, and there's cranes around her, and it's a very striking illustration. In the UK version, they went a completely different route. There are softer pastel colors with the cranes in the air coming down, and you just see a small little silhouette of the woman. So, although I think on an artistic level, the UK is prettier, I am more drawn to the US version. I just like that bold illustration, so giving it to the US. Next up is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. And both have this similar color scheme, but the US version has, it looks like an army in the back with the sun on the top. There's a flag, and the font's a little hard to read. In the UK version, there is this dragon that's kind of interesting, and there's an opportunity to write a little blurb on the dragon's body. And I think I like the UK version. I think I've seen different variations on the US version, so the UK seems a little more unique. So I'm giving it to the UK. Now we have Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. And totally different covers in this one. The US version, I guess that's a heart, but it's like this wooden filigree that's breaking apart. The UK version is more illustrated. There's this archway, there's these stars, there's these 2 guards. One of the guards has no head. Am I looking at that right? Or has a veil over the head? I like the UK version a lot more. US version looks generic. Looks like they're basing it on Twilight, that type of cover. So I am much more drawn to the UK. And what do you know? We're at another tie, 8-8. Okay, moving on. Billy Summers by Stephen King. Okay, I have not read this. I've heard of it. The US version's kind of interesting because it looks like it's a cover of red trees that's torn apart, and there's a car driving through, but you see the text of the novel underneath. And the UK version is kind of boring. It looks like a winter scene, at least with the colors of the blues and the whites. of a house with a light in the window. I don't know. I think the US version is much more interesting, so I'm giving it to the US. Next up is The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. I don't like either of these covers, but let's keep looking. Right away, the US is much easier to read. It looks like there are these vines with thorns on them, and then there's this one red and white flower. It's not a book that would interest me at all, but at least it's easy to read. The UK version is harder to read. The words almost get lost in this cover, but the cover, I think, is more interesting with the greens and the blue. Sort of looks like waves, and it almost looks like we're peeking into this other world. I don't know if this is a science fiction alternate reality type thing, but I am more intrigued on the UK side, even though I think the US side is more striking. I'm going to say the UK. Just going to say it, UK. Next we have Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. And don't know anything about this book, except it might be about ramen. Because in the US version, it looks like there's two chopsticks holding some ramen noodles. Oh, it's a memoir. Interesting. And the UK version, it looks like an Asian person is holding, I'm going to say ramen packets because I have ramen in my mind, but it could be groceries of any type. I'm going to have to say the US. For one thing, the red cover is much more vibrant than sort of that faded orange cover, but those chopsticks with the noodles, I think it's much more interesting than sort of a depressed looking person going shopping. So USA. Next up is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. Love that title. By Ocean Vuong. I guess this is going to be some type of literary novel. The US has a black and white photo, which is hard to understand what's going on. Maybe it's an arm around something. Gosh, it's hard to figure out. The UK version is much simpler with these orange leaves. So again, this isn't the type of book I would pick up either of these copies, but I think I'm going to have to give it to the UK. That black and white, whatever it is just confusing me. In the UK version, at least we get some color, and that gives it a little bit more interest. Oh God, we're still at a tie, 10 to 10. Okay, next up we have Anxious People by Frederick Backman. And I'm just going to say right away it's going to be the UK version because it looks a lot more interesting with those windows, the red cover, something's going on in each of the windows, and the US version we just have two people with maybe back-to-back, illustrated, fine, but much more interesting right off the bat with the UK design. Next up is The Court of Miracles by Kester Grant. Ah, boy. Okay, this is the type of covers that I do not like, especially the US ones where the title is the main feature and you have stuff around it. We've seen this so often in young adult fantasy titles that I'm just sick of it. The UK versions, at least, is a little bit interesting. We have a dark city upside down, and then we have sort of these arches overhead. It's definitely not the most striking cover I've seen today, but it's definitely a notch or two above the US version. So, UK. Next up is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. Okay. Wouldn't pick up either of these books, but they have sort of this quirky illustration. The US version, they both have the same color scheme, but the US version has a man in the foreground, a woman in the background, and the UK version, I don't know what's going on. It's two couples seated at a computer, right? Computer station. I guess they're at work, and they have these dark thoughts over their head. Much more interesting than the US version. So I'm going to have to give it to the UK. And that ends it. The Battle of the Book Covers goes to Great Britain, the UK, 13-10. Okay, decisive victory this time. No more namby-pamby ties. Let me know if you agreed with my choices or if you would have gone in a different direction. And if you played along, who was your winners? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.